In this episode of Idaho 911, we will be looking at the kidnapping of Lieutenant Governor William B. Kinne. On June 12, 1929, Kinne was driving from Lewiston to Orofino along US 12, the Snake River Highway. Along the way, 4 armed men stepped into the road. They were Albert Reynolds of Missouri, Ingolf Snortland of North Dakota, Robert Livingston of Alabama, and Edward Fliss of Wisconsin. They tied Kinne up and held him in the backseat of his own car as they rocketed towards a planned bank robbery at the then injudicious 60 miles an hour. The car blew a tire near Orofino, and the carjackers pulled off to the side of the road and hid in a ditch until they could capture another car. Warren L. Tribby, a banker, and Paul Kild, a lumberman, pulled over to see if they could assist with Kinne's crashed car. The carjackers attempted to subdue the Good Samaritans with a threat of violence, which had worked on Kinne. Instead, Tribby and Kild opted to fight 4 armed men. Kild was shot twice, and both were beaten unconscious. This time, they tied Kinne and their 2 new victims to a tree away from the highway. One of the men stayed behind to guard them, while the other 3 villains continued on to the bank they planned to rob. 4 hours later, the men returned to pick up their partner, having decided to not rob the bank after all. Instead, they robbed the bound men, getting $14 from Kinne and $200 from Tribby. They sped away, leaving their victims tied to a tree in the wilderness. They were overheard to say that they were planning to rob another bank in Pierce. Tribby had a pocket knife the assailants missed, and the 3 managed to free themselves and make it to Greer by foot, where a 4-state manhunt was initiated. Lewis County Sheriff Alva W. Mitchell organized 3 posses, conscripting farmers, loggers, skilled trackers, and even Boy Scouts across Nez Perce, Lewis, Latah, and Clearwater counties. A pack of bloodhounds was even flown in from Yakima. 2 days later, Latah County Sheriff's Deputy Miles B. Pierce found 2 of the carjackers asleep on the bank of the Potlatch River near Julietta. Meanwhile, Kendrick Town Constable Ernest Davis, acting on a tip from a dairy farmer who had sold milk to 2 quote-unquote scruffy men, located and arrested the other 2 men. All 4 are placed in jail in Julietta and not only confess to the kidnapping, but also name a 5th man. George Norman of Wisconsin, who had planned the whole thing. The would-be bank robbers claimed they got cold feet after the gunplay when they hijacked Tribby's car, so they drove to Pierce to pick up George Norman, who was already casing the bank, and then ditched the car in the woods near Pierce. Hiking through the woods, they tried to leave Idaho. Tribby's car was located, as was one of the pistols, and 200 blood-soaked dollars under the front seat. So intense was the interest in the case that the prisoners were relocated from Julietta. In Lewiston, they had to be secreted in the back door of the jailhouse to avoid the 1,500-person mob waiting for them. Their hearings were held in their jail cells because it was believed they could not enter the courthouse safely. All 5 would plead guilty in Nez Perce County District Court and are sentenced to a total of 102 years at the Idaho State Penitentiary. Just a few months later, on September 28th, Kinne's appendix burst, but was misdiagnosed. He would die on October 1st from complications. Fliss was released in 1934, having served only 5 years of his 25-year sentence. In the Idaho State Pen, he had made friends with Herman Metz Whaley and William Daynard. The 3 would go on to kidnap 9-year-old George H. Weyerhaeuser in Tacoma on May 26, 1925. Fliss was arrested by the FBI for money laundering and conspiracy to kidnap. His previous conviction from the Kinne kidnapping led to Fliss receiving the maximum sentence in the Weyerhaeuser case.